chief prosecutor for his closing argument.
Mr. President and members of the tribunal, it is impossible in summation to do more than outline with bold strokes the vitals of this trial's mad and melancholy record, for no time has ever witnessed slaughter on such a grand scale, such cruelties and inhumanities, such wholesale deportations of peoples into slavery, such annihilations of minorities. Events which will live is the historical text of the 20th century's shame and depravity. Terror was the order of the day. Civilians were arrested without charges, committed without counsel, executed without hearing. Villages were destroyed, the male inhabitants shot or sent to forced labor, and the children scattered abroad. The Nazi movement will be of evil memory in history because of its persecution of the Jews, the most far-flung and terrible racial persecution of all time. So thorough and uncompromising was this program that the Jews of Europe as a race no longer exist, thus fulfilling the diabolic prophecy of Adolf Hitler at the beginning of the war. Generations to come will remember this decade. If we cannot eliminate the cause and prevent the repetition of these barbaric events, this century may yet succeed in bringing the doom of civilization. The time has come for final judgment, and if the case that I present seems hard and uncompromising, then it is only because the evidence makes it so. A glance at the doc will show that despite quarrels among themselves, each defendant played a part that fitted in with every other, and all advanced a common plan. It was these men among millions of others, and it was these men leading millions of others who built up Adolf Hitler. They intoxicated him. He, with a psychopathic personality, with power and adulation. They fed his hates and aroused his fears. They put a loaded gun in his eager hands. It was left to Hitler to pull the trigger, and when he did, they all, at that time, applauded. Hitler's guilt stands admitted, by some defendants reluctantly, by some vindictively. But Hitler's guilt is the guilt of the whole dock, and of every man in it. These defendants now ask this tribunal to say they are not guilty of planning, executing, or conspiring to commit this long list of crimes and wrongs. They stand before the record of this tribunal as blood-stained Gloucester stood by the body of his slain king. He begged the widow, as they beg of you, "Say I slew them not." And the queen replied, "Then say they are not slain, but dead they are." If you were to say of these men that they are not guilty, it would be as true to say there has been no war. There are no slain. There has been no crime.
Go back to what we said before, you and me being former Republicans, still conservatives, Donald Trump blowing up what conservatives would have believed over the past 50 years about Russian interference in Venezuela, about Russian interference In Syria, the Russians hadn't been in the Middle East since 73. Trump's totally fine with it. Totally fine with the Russians interfering in our hemisphere. Right, Mike? North Korea? Oh my God, if Barack Obama were allowing the North Korean dictator to rub America's nose in you-know-what? Impeachment proceedings would begin, and they'd be getting to the full goal. Mr. Speaker, they got a missile that will nuclearize Omaha, and it's a threat to America, and he's got to be impeached. And yet they're letting North Korea, Russia, and Iran run roughshod over us, and aren't saying anything about it because of personality cult.
Well, the problem might be that they are, in fact, saying things about it, but they're saying different things. So let's...
Brett McGurk, here's one more piece of sound of Secretary Pompeo on another Sunday show, this time talking about China. Take a look.
I want to ask you about China. Chinese officials are headed here to Washington for trade talks. We heard from a Pentagon official on Friday a pretty stark description of what is underway right now in China. He said that there are 3 million Muslims being rounded up into concentration camps in China. Why hasn't the administration taken any kind of action or sanction against Beijing for this?
Oh, goodness. President Trump has pushed back against China in a way that no previous president had. They had given the Chinese a free pass in every dimension. President Trump is now pushing back on the enormous trade abuses. You've seen me personally speak out about the same situation you're describing. This number is certainly up to 1 million people held in re-education camps. The Trump administration is going to hold every nation accountable.
You're okay with that term, re-education camps, not concentration camps, which the Pentagon used?
We can use lots of different terms to describe what's taking place. This is enormous human rights violations. I've spoken about it repeatedly.
Why
the entire administration has spoken out it repeatedly.
You just said 1 million minorities.
Yeah.
The Pentagon says 3 million.
Yeah.
Is there a discrepancy within the administration on what to do about this and what's actually happening?
There's not. Don't play ticky-tack. There's no discrepancy. This administration...
Concentration camps is a loaded term, sir, and 3 million Muslims being rounded up is something that many would expect the United States to raise at the highest levels.
And we've done so.
I just want everybody to understand what just happened there. America's Secretary of State compared 1 million people being in re-education camps to 3 million people being in concentration camps, which is what the Pentagon says is the actual case. He called that ticky-tack. 3 million people in concentration camps. The Secretary of State says that's ticky-tack. Now, so that's what he did to Margaret Brennan on CBS, accused her of playing, quote, ticky-tack over 3 million Muslims in concentration camps in China. It's according to Donald Trump's Pentagon. And then he calls Chris Wallace a liar, says he's misleading the viewers when actually he's not. And then he pleads ignorance on Venezuela. Brett, the floor is yours.
There's a crisis within our national security system. There's not a process that is harnessing all the expertise of the U.S. government to develop options for the president. The president, I don't think, really wants options. You have the National Security Advisor getting way ahead of his skis.